Imagine conducting EVAs outside the International Space Station while working on a solar panel, when suddenly the tether breaks. In an instant, you're no longer attached to the station and begin to float away in space, drifting, spinning, with nothing to grasp. The ISS, the single sanctuary in the hostile environment of space, starts to grow much smaller while it disappears in the distance. What happens next? Is there any way one could survive? Or would this just be a slow and scary end? The thought of a flying astronaut in space sounds like a science fiction thriller, while actually, it is a grim reality apart from which the space agencies can ill afford to ignore. Space is unkind, and the slightest mistake could turn lethal. For this very reason, astronauts on spacewalks are attached to the ISS, but what if their tether tore? Those next few moments would contour into a battle for survival. The first would be the disorienting sensation of being untethered. You're still traveling at over 17,000 miles an hour with the ISS, but feel as if you're just drifting. You could hardly get a grip again as the tumble in space escalates. Your backdrop now the vastness of the cosmos, just helpless, spinning, with the station becoming smaller and smaller in view. But here's the catch. Panic at this moment would only make things worse. The next few seconds of your actions will determine whether you make it back alive. Thankfully, the astronauts do have a last resort if they ever find themselves floating away from the station, a contraption called SAFER, Simplified Aid for EVA Rescue. Think of it as a miniature jetpack. Powered by nitrogen thrusters, SAFER enables the astronaut to stabilize and maneuver back to safety, courtesy of a handheld joystick. It's pretty ingenious. However, this backup system comes with some very considerable limitations. For one, SAFER has a limited fuel supply. Not being in control of how you use it could burn through the fuel, leaving you thereafter with no means of return. This means that an astronaut should stay cool, stop spinning, and be oriented toward the ISS, then use careful and precise moves to navigate back. One mistake could see you float further away into space. Let's say you manage to neutralize your movements and orient yourself toward the ISS. You start your return. In short, calculated bursts from the SAFER unit. Everything is looking fine, until you start considering another unseen danger of space. Debris. Space may look like a vacuum, but it's actually really full of trash. Tiny bits of shattered satellites, dead spaceships, and all sorts of discarded parts from prior missions whiz around at phenomenal speeds. They're much too small to see, but travel upwards of 17,500 miles an hour. A chunk of debris no larger than a marble might cause catastrophic damage to an astronaut's suit or SAFER unit. Basically, the danger of space debris is not theoretical. In case there is an impact of a small piece on your suit, it may puncture the layers of protective suits and cause you to lose oxygen, leading to rapid depressurization of the suit. Even worse, if debris can do damage to the SAFER pack, then you're without any options for movement control. With it, you are totally dependent upon your crew for being rescued. The farther an astronaut drifts from the ISS, the more time is of the essence to save them. The likeliest course of action would probably be a crewed rescue mission. A fellow astronaut could be sent out using their own SAFER unit, or might tether themselves to the station and then carefully move toward the stranded one. This would be an extremely delicate operation. The rescuer has to be very careful not to move too quickly or mishandle the situation, lest they find themselves drifting away too, making it a very risky procedure. The rescuer, once reaching the adrift astronaut, would have to grab hold with great care. Now both are floating free in space, and one wrong move could send them tumbling uncontrollably. The rescuer's tether is now the critical lifeline for pulling them back to safety, but even the best efforts of any rescue could be ruined by space itself, especially if space debris or equipment failure complicates the mission. Even supposing that the astronaut can avoid the debris and work their way into a stable motion, there's another, more insidious problem: oxygen. Yes, the oxygen supply within a spacesuit is designed to be available for several hours on a spacewalk, meaning it's not unlimited. Every breath you take has you closer to running out. If you're in an extended drift, then your oxygen supply is your worst nightmare. Suits also have systems built into them that regulate body temperature, so that the astronauts don't overheat or freeze. In an emergency, however, those systems could be compromised. If your suit starts to degrade and lose its capability to sustain an environment within, extreme cold or heat, for instance, from direct sun may further challenge survival. Basically, you're fighting against the clock. The outlier cases may involve sending a spacecraft to retrieve the stranded astronaut. Supply ships like Russia's Progress or SpaceX's Dragon could theoretically be fitted for a rescue mission, but the challenge here is in precision to intercept a drifting astronaut. Any small mistake in the calculation of the space vehicle's trajectory might push the astronaut further into space instead of bringing them back. A rescue spacecraft would have to very carefully match the astronaut's speed and trajectory, or risk making things worse. It's not impossible, but the move is dangerous. The process would be a time-consuming one, and time happens to be exactly what the astronaut does not have. Running out of oxygen while waiting for a spacecraft to come would be a race against odds that few can win. Let's assume for a moment that all rescue efforts have failed. The astronaut has drifted too far for the safer system to help. No spacecraft is coming. Is there anything left to do? In theory, an astronaut could use the principles of Newton's third law of motion. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction to change direction. The astronaut could propel away from themselves using an available tool like a wrench or a camera with as much force as possible. The recoil could, at least in that frictionless environment, push them toward the space station. Even if an astronaut managed to stay cool, the psychological effects of drifting away from the ISS could not be taken for granted. Astronauts are trained to undertake stressful environments, but being alone and afloat in space is a different kind of stress altogether. The vast emptiness of space, coupled with the disappearance of the station from view, could lead to panic or despair. In these moments, clear-mindedness is as crucial as any survival skill. The astronaut would have to control breathing to make oxygen last, consider at least some rescue possibilities, and try to keep feelings of loneliness at bay. So, what would happen if an astronaut floated away to space? With their safety measures and tools like SAFER, space agencies such as NASA and Roscosmos do what they can. One can never know if an astronaut will make it or not. Paced by limited oxygen, highly possible collisions through space debris, and the psychological strain due to isolation, this is probably one of the most dangerous situations an astronaut can get themselves into. Even with rescue efforts from the crew or a spacecraft, there's no telling how things would unfold in such a hostile environment. It all comes down to precision, timing, and luck. In the end, the cold reality is that space is still one of the most unforgiving places humans have ever explored, and in a blink of an eye, things can go really wrong. But, what do you think? Do you think you could deal with floating away in space? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.